everybody. Welcome to Rachel's Reviews and the Hidden Gems podcast. We are really excited to be here to be talking about something brand new that we haven't talked about before. It's the IMDB TV service where they have tons of free content that you can check out. And we're going to give you some of our favorite picks from that streaming service. And I'm film critic Rachel Wagner, and Ryan is here.
Hey, Rachel, so great to be back with you once again. And I'm particularly excited for this week's podcast because we're digging into a streaming service that we haven't touched on at all ever, and it revolves around a website that I use literally every day just for planning my reviews or just general stuff. But it's IMDB TV.
Yeah, I hadn't even heard of this as far as a service until I was just kind of messing around this last week, and I found out that there were just so many different things that they offered. And I thought, well, this is kind of, in a way, a hidden gem service. Not as much maybe that the movies are like all that hidden gems, but the whole service itself.
Yeah, it's not like Canopy where it's a streaming service that's made up of these smaller indie and classic movies. It's like, no, like this is completely off the beaten path, because I think a large chunk of people use IMDb just for like research purposes. It'll be like, hey, what was that one actor in that one movie in 1989 that was directed by X, also starring Y, and won Z awards?
Mm-hmm.
Let's IMDb it. But now they also offer movies too.
Yeah, and I use IMDb and Wikipedia kind of in different ways in researching for my content, because the Wikipedia, it depends on the topic. It'll be more or less accurate depending on what it is. But for a lot of the movie stuff, it's pretty decent. And in there, it has a lot of the more sort of autobiographical kind of details behind the scenes kind of a thing going on with Wikipedia, where one nice thing about the IMDb is that they have a picture with every name, so that if you're trying to think, I remember that person in that movie, but I can't think of their name, or I remember the character name, then you can just look, you got the picture, you got the character name, you've got the actor all there. And we actually have for Hallmarkies podcast, we have the IMDb Pro, which allows you to get all the information on the agents and publicists and other things like that. So that's how we're able to get all the interviews. So we have like 99% of them come through IMDb Pro in the context on there. So that's definitely worth, for the kind of podcast we do, it's definitely worth the investment.
Oh, that's pretty nifty stuff. I remember there was a time when I just tried to stay away from Wikipedia because it was during college where professors were like, you're not allowed to use Wikipedia. But then I was like, okay, why not? But then the more I thought about it, the more it was like, okay, Wikipedia, you can edit it, but more often than not, it's legit sources. Yeah. And if you're kind of very coy about it, you can just scroll down. There's a massive bibliography there. Just click it and use that. Yeah. So it's a win-win situation no matter what.
Right. Yeah. And it depends on the topic. Like some topics I think are a little more reliable than other topics. And I've had good luck, at least with Disney and some of the other, like for the Talking Disney podcast, I've had good luck with Wikipedia, but it just depends. You have to kind of check your sources as much as you can and try to do your homework, but it can be a good resource depending on the needs. But it's just kind of different in the way it's set up than IMDb, and it's like both of them together are very helpful for me.
Right. A lot of fake news out there, kids.
Yeah. But yeah, IMDb TV is a whole bunch of programs that you can watch for free, which is my favorite price.
Indeed. And it's nice with IMDb because I was going through it and I'm like, I'm not sure if these are necessarily hidden, like you were talking about earlier. It's like, I'm not sure if these weren't exactly hidden gems, but at the same time, especially in the TV section, I was like, they have all the seasons of 24 on there. And it was like, they have all of Lost on there. I've always wanted to watch that and be very disappointed. And one of my picks I stumbled on out of nowhere, and I'm like, I don't care if it's hidden or not. I'm gonna talk about it.
Yeah.
So it's like one of those where it's like coming across the wardrobe in Chronicles of Narnia. It may look like a standard wardrobe, but once you go through it, it's like a whole new world.
Yeah, and you can access these all on Amazon Prime, so maybe it's a little bit of a cheat. But if you don't have Amazon Prime, you can still watch IMDb TV. So there we go.
Indeed.
So let's talk about it. My first one is a fun little action movie called Speed. And this
Whoa.
is, some people might call this Die Hard on a Bus, but it's true. And it's really fun. And this is where we first got to know Keanu Reeves, and we first got to know, at least as an action star. And well, I guess no, Point Break was the first, but this is one of the first times we got to know Keanu Reeves. And then this is the breakout role for one of the breakout roles for Sandra Bullock as the bus driver in here. And Dennis Hopper plays a really good villain, and it manages to make driving a bus pretty exciting. Have you seen this one?
No, surprisingly not. I've always meant to, but I've always wanted to because my Keanu Reeves knowledge like starts at the Matrix and then on. I don't know all that much about his pre-Matrix work. I know a majority of it is good, like Point Break and Speed and a bunch of others, but
Yeah.
like and like before that, I remember he was in Bram Stoker's Dracula. He was terrible in it, but God bless him. But I've always heard nothing but good things about Speed. It's really a genius premise. It's like there's this bus, a police officer, and a bunch of civilians. The bus
Yeah.
can't go under 50 miles an hour, and if it does, kerboom, there's your movie. And
Yeah.
it's beautiful in its simplicity.
Yeah, it's a very simple concept, and I think that's what makes it so tense is that it's just not very convoluted. It's just very, very simple. What's going to happen to these people? What's going to happen to the bus? To the people that they're on the freeway, they're driving around, all of that, and of course Sandra Bullock is so likable in any movie she's in. She's super likable, and so what's going to happen with her. And so yeah, it's a really fun little action movie.
The one thing that I do know about Speed is that Dennis Hopper's character, he's the villain, was a former cop and he was forcibly retired and he just really didn't know what to do with himself, and so it was like, oh, I'll just I'll do this bus thing. And when I remember reading that, and I was like, this movie could have so easily just been the generic, we're going to steal a bus and we're just going to inconvenience a lot of people. But no, I think giving the subplot of former cop has spent his entire life to this one thing and is like it's like, we don't need you anymore, old man. Here's your gold watch. Have a nice life. No, it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, sheesh, you're doing bad things, but at the same time, I kind of feel for you. It's
Mm-hmm.
complicated.
Yeah, and also you have just Dennis Hopper's so good as a villain. He's so I don't know, even his voice, I feel like he's just does a good job as kind of as an over the top villain.
Dennis Hopper had a weird career. He could be amazing in movies like Hoosiers or in Hoosiers or Easy Rider, or he could be in crap like Waterworld. Like he had a very up and down career, but when he was good, he was excellent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what's your first pick?
So my first pick, and this is the pick that I was talking about when I found it. I was like, I don't know if this was hidden because at the time it was the biggest show on television, but I think it has gone under the radar a little bit, and I want to bring it up. It's Malcolm in the Middle. In the year 2000, when this premiered, this was like the biggest hit on television. I believe its premiere episode did like 20 million viewers. I could be inaccurate on that, The next episode did like 30 million, and then it settled to around 15 million. And it stayed in the seven figures throughout its entire run, capping off at about 3 million, which in today's numbers is like amazing. But Malcolm in the Middle tells the story of this kid named Malcolm, played by Frankie Muniz, who learns that he is a genius. He has an IQ of 165. And, well, this is a problem for him because he comes from a family that's like not exactly dirt poor, but like just like general poor. They make enough to get by. His entire family is like just dysfunctional in their own unique way. The mom, Lois, played brilliantly by Jane Kaczmarek, is the leader of the family, who can be very cruel, but has her pretensions of, okay, she cares and knows what she's doing. There's the father, Hal, played by Bryan Cranston, who, if you only know him for his Breaking Bad stuff, watching him in this will give you a whole new appreciation for his versatility, because he's brilliant in this. Then there's the brothers, Reese, who starts off as a goofball and just the dumbass of the group, but then by the end is actually one of the more likable characters. There's the youngest brother, Dewey, who starts off as the cute one, but then by the end becomes like one of the smarter ones of the family. And then there's Malcolm himself, who starts off as like okay, I really hate this, but then kind of has its moments, but then by the end just becomes your crappy standard high school teenager. And then there's another brother named Francis, who is off in military school, and his whole arc is just all kinds of nuts. So I'll just save that for another time. But what makes the show good is just how it takes this family and doesn't do the traditional sitcom thing where it's like you have your traditional conflict and then everything just ends by the 30-minute mark. We all go home happy. Sometimes things don't work out, just like in real life. The novelty in that is pretty lacking, I will say, but the writing, the cinematography, and just the general look and feel of the show just absolutely nails it. Like, it nails it perfectly. Like I said, the dialogue in this show is absolutely on point. Even some of the lesser seasons near the end were still really funny at times. And I don't think there's a truly bad season of the show. There's like a lesser few seasons, like specifically the last season, where some things just went completely off the wall. But other than that, I still think the show is very underrated. And in terms of just family dynamics, I think the show has just aged tremendously well. And it gave Bryan Cranston a second wind for his career. So there ain't nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think it is underrated. It's really funny. It's got really good child casting, which makes a big difference in these kinds of shows. I think if anybody likes Modern Family, if they like The Middle, if they like shows like The Goldbergs, I think that you will like Malcolm in the Middle. I think all of those shows have different elements that you find in Malcolm in the Middle.
Yeah, one of my favorite episodes of the show is the episode that I mentioned that drew 30 million viewers. It's called Red Dress, and it is essentially when Lois and Hal are trying to have their like one date night per year, and she bought this very special dress which turns out to be burnt. And so she's like, which one of you kids did this? And they're all like trying to blame each other, but then they realize we didn't do it. And so it's just a big blame game, but then it just turns into this big torture session where she's like trying to get the truth out of the boys in their own way. Yeah, exactly. They have their heads under the couch, which is a punishment, I guess. But anyway, and Frances is trying to coach them through and like, okay, the next step is interrogation. She's trying to butter you up. Do not buy it. You understand? And it's all genius. And by the end, we later learn that Hal pretty much is like, oh, I'll just have my monthly cigar. And the match just went out of control and burnt the dress. So it wasn't even the boy's fault. It was Hal's fault. And it's just amazing. If you want one episode to show just how genius this show is, definitely Red Dress. And there are many others that are great as well, like the Krellboyne Picnic, which is really good. And there's one episode where Francis introduces his wife, Piyama, which is really good. And the whole arc where Lois gives birth to the baby Jamie, the fifth child, which is really good. I could talk about this show for days, but I think I've gone on long enough.
Very good. All right. Well, my next choice is definitely, I would say, not a hidden gem, but nevertheless, I thought it was pretty impressive that they got it for this service. It's Kung Fu Panda is on here, which is a pretty good, big name, I would say, for them to get on a service like this for free. So kids love Kung Fu Panda. It's so much fun. So yeah, so you have Jack Black. He's voicing Poe, who is this sort of insecure uh, panda bear, but he dreams of being a warrior, and then he ends up getting trained and through various stumbles, and he meets the Furious Five. And I just think it's a really fun animated film. I really like the action. It's very sweet, and the animation's really fun. I think the second one's probably even better, but I still think this one is solid. It's definitely up there. All three Kung Fu Panda movies, I think, are up there for me in my DreamWorks ranking. So yeah, if you haven't seen Kung Fu Panda, you definitely should. And you have a great cast with Jack Black, Angelina Jolie, Ian McShane, Jackie Chan, Seth Rogen, Lucy Liu, just this great cast. So Dustin Hoffman. So yeah, you should check it out if you haven't seen it.
Yeah, Kung Fu Panda's awesome. I've seen this movie so many times. I think, in my opinion, for as far as DreamWorks goes, there are two premier trilogies: How to Train Your Dragon and Kung Fu Panda. Both are good in their own ways, but those two are DreamWorks at their very finest.
Yeah,
And
agreed.
while my favorite of the bunch is number two, I think the first one is like one. It's like Kung Fu Panda 2 is 1, and then Kung Fu Panda 1 is 1A, because there's a lot to love about this movie. Just from the little jokes, like when Shifu and Poe are hiking up the mountain, and Poe gets tired and is like, he starts to like wash himself in the pool of sacred tears, and Shifu's like, "Panda, we do not wash our pits in the pool of sacred tears." And Poe's like in the middle of doing it. Every single time I see that, I just laugh my head off, because it's like, it's so ridiculous. And the whole fight that they have over the last dumpling, it's like, oh my god, who's gonna get the dumpling? And there's a part in that fight where Shifu's just like picking at his thumb, at his knuckles. Like, you don't think it hurts, but they sell it like it does, so it's like, I guess it hurts.
All
There's
right.
just so much to like about this movie, from the very beginning to the middle to the final battle, which is one of my favorite final battles in any DreamWorks movie, where it's like Ian McShane, or actually Tai Lung, mind fart, Tai Lung gets like the upper hand for a while, but then Poe just like uses his gifts, and he's like, he bounces it off his stomach, and just it could be, this movie could have been just so incredibly silly, but they treat it seriously, and at the end of the day, it's funny at the right times, but it also can be very serious at the right times.
Yeah, when he say goodbye to Uguay, that is definitely an emotional moment. It's a really solid film. So, what is your next pick?
So my next pick is my favorite movie of 2018. It's the documentary Won't You Be My Neighbor. I had no plans on seeing this movie, because it didn't come to my local theater, and I was like, it's probably going to go to Orlando or something, and I like Mr. Rogers, but not enough to schlep up to Orlando. But there was a theater relatively close, about 20 minutes away, that was playing it, so I was like, all right, I'll go check it out. And so I did, and no other movie that I saw in 2018 came close to just the love and the care and the appreciation that this movie showed to Fred Rogers and his just general legacy. I knew stuff about him that I knew stuff. I learned stuff about him that I never knew about. Like, he was an ordained minister, and how he felt like his show wasn't reaching out to people, when in reality it really was. Which, that part of it was really sad, like going through your life and being like, I'm doing all of this and it's not reaching anyone, when in reality it touched a generation. And just, it went into not only Fred Rogers' psyche, but also how he tried to talk to children in a way that wasn't demeaning, but just in a careful way as well. Like the one episode he did after the assassination of Robert F. Kennedy. They did a whole section of that movie based on that episode. And when talking about a difficult topic like that, it's just like it's kind of a no-win situation. But Fred Rogers, he managed to pull it off, and the the interviews from his family, like his sons John and Jim, they were really good. His wife Joanne, she was awesome. Like they were married for all of that time, and just when I get married, I wanna love my wife like Joanne loved Fred. It just that's the goals for me. And just at the end of the day, I'm surprised that this movie didn't at least get nominated for an Oscar. That's reason number 20 million that I don't trust the Oscars, but side road.
Yeah, especially the documentary branch is the worst.
But
Yeah.
this documentary is incredible. I walked out of there and I was nearly in tears because Fred Rogers was truly a man with no equal. So much so that when I did my best movies of 2018 video that year, I got a sweater vest and a tie, and I did it all like Mr. Rogers would. And I was afraid people were going to be like, well, he spoiled his number one in like his attire. But then I did a thing where it was like, but people actually really liked that.
Yeah, it's so good. I absolutely loved it as well. I thought it was so moving, and I thought the Tom Hanks movie was fine, but nowhere near as good as this documentary. And I just thought that it was so moving when he is speaking before the Congress, and he makes that surly old congressman change his mind, senator, whatever, change his mind. Like that was so amazing. And I just eventually we have to get the movie that shows that, because I thought that was like one of the most incredible moments I've seen in a movie. I mean, it was amazing.
And the damnedest part about that whole thing is that Fred Rogers, like, he never raised his voice once. He was like,
no.
You MF senator, you need to listen to me now. Like, he never
Right.
did that. He was like, Mr. Senator, I am thankful for my time, and I will present this in a fashion that is according. And he was super prim and proper, and by the end of the speech, the congressman is just sitting there like, oh, I lost
earned
this
your money.
one.
You just earned your. It was incredible, and I just think that he is such an example of how to love people.
Yeah,
That's unbelievable. And I showed it to my parents, and they're tough. They're tough critics. They don't like very many movies, and they loved it. So it's so good. Very great pick.
yeah.
All right.
At one note before we go on, there was, and this show was, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood was one of the first to have an African American character that was treated as an equal. He was played by Francois Clemens. I believe I'm saying his name.
And he's on there, and
he's on the documentary, and every time he was there, I'm like, it's my boy Francois. And just coming out to Mr. Rogers as being gay and all of that was handled with a great deal of tact. And just this documentary is awesome. If you haven't seen it, you all have no excuse. It's literally for free on a site that a lot of people use. So do it.
Yeah. So my next pick is also a documentary, but it's very different. It's called Broadway Idiot. So it's not a sweet and cuddly like Fred Rogers. It is about the creation of the Broadway musical American Idiot, based on of course, the album American Idiot by Green Day. And you have all of the major people that are involved, including Billy Joe Armstrong, who's of course the lead of Green Day. Mm-hmm. And I love Broadway. I love Broadway musicals. And so anytime I can get kind of behind the scenes of creation of a Broadway musical, I really enjoy that. And just all that goes into everything from, of course, the songs are the most important part, but then also the choreography and the staging, production, and everything about it. I just love Broadway, and so this was really fun to learn more about the creation of the musical.
Yeah, I went through a massive Green Day phase when I was younger, and it honestly coincided with the creation of this musical. And a bit of a fun fact, when I was in my musical theater company, not my musical theater company, but when I was part of a musical theater company, we went on a workshop trip to New York City, and we got to learn some of the numbers from the American Idiot team.
Oh, cool.
And I got to meet a lot of the extras. They were all incredibly nice people, and I got to ask them questions about, the show business and all of that. And long days, very long days. We were dancing and singing from like 8 a.m. in the morning till like 7 p.m. at night. So even though we were technically in New York City, it was by no means a vacation. But this is one. I have not seen this particular documentary, but I know a lot about Green Day, and I know a lot about the making of this musical. So I'll definitely have to check it out, because
Yeah.
I went through, like I said, I went through a pretty big Green Day phase. Like for me, their peak was around this time, and then like Uno Do Tre, and then their later albums just kind of, but
Yeah. Yeah, well, you have to let me know what you think when you get to see it, because it's very interesting. If you, I just like learning how things are made, like even
yeah,
if it's not like my favorite thing in the world, I just think it's interesting.
right.
So, what's your next pick?
So my next pick is from 2013, and it is called Captain Phillips. And the reason why I chose this is because I recently saw the movie News of the World, which starred Tom Hanks and was directed by Paul Greengrass. And when I saw this on IMDb, I was like, oh, I gotta choose this because it stars Tom Hanks and was directed by Paul Greengrass. So nice bit of continuity there. But Captain Phillips tells the true story of the 2009 hijacking of the Maersk, Alabama, by a band of Somali pirates. And I was definitely old enough to remember when this was happening and was very scared of the matter. And so when I heard this movie was coming out, there was a part of me that was like, a little too soon, guys. But then I learned who was in it, and I was like, okay, maybe this will be good. And it turned out to be really good. Tom Hanks is in this. We all know who he is. We did a best and worst of him, and he's awesome in whatever he's in. But the biggest surprise for me was the main pirate named, and I'm gonna try and get his name right, Barkhad Abdi. I probably butchered
Yeah.
that, but he was really good, and he's gone
He's
on.
also in the movie that you recommended randomly, in the movie you recommended last week with Eye in the Sky.
Yeah, when I was doing my research, I was like, oh, he was an Eye in the Sky. Holy crap! But uh,
Yeah.
but Barkhad has been in a lot of. He's been in a lot since Captain Phillips. He was in a movie called Good Time, directed by the Safdie brothers, and that one was really good. He was in My Beloved, Blade Runner 2049. He was in Castle Rock on Hulu, so he's stayed busy since his Captain Phillips days, and just in general, this movie is just keeps you on the edge of your seat. Paul Greengrass, there's a lot of people who don't like Paul Greengrass's movies because of the way he films his action, like very shaky cam heavy. And I do sympathize, but at the same time, Paul Greengrass does it in a way where you're like, okay, this is shaking a lot, but I think I know what's going on, because he still keeps the geography in a good place to where you're like, okay, the pirates are there, Hanks is here, and it's just like you get the feeling of where everybody is. And this movie, of course, spawned the meme of "Look at me, I am the captain now." That just still gets mileage to this day. So there's that. But then the movie just has a brilliant ending where after this whole thing happens and Captain Phillips gets off the ship and he's like, am I off the ship? Am I off? And the doctor's like,
Oh,
you're
I
off the
love
ship.
that.
It's fine. It's sad and gratifying and just satisfying all at once. And it can only be done by Tom Hanks, who, like you said, is brilliant. And out of Greengrass's movies, I think this is one of his more underrated. I think people were like, "Oh, Captain Phillips is really good," and then just went underneath out of nowhere. But
Yeah, I mean,
I think people should look it up.
Burkett Abdi, he got nominated for an Oscar for that role
He should have
in
won.
that film,
He
and
should have won because he had an excellent scene where he and Captain Phillips are in the lifeboat and they're talking, and Phillips is like, "What are your plans? Like, what are your goals?" And he's like, "Maybe America, maybe." And you're just like, "Oh, it is just." He does a really really good job, and he should have at least.
mhm.
He was nominated, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he
Okay.
was. I'm not sure who won that year, but he was nominated. So very good pick. I love that movie.
Probably the wrong choice. That's who won.
So my next pick is actually a film by Tim Burton, who's a filmmaker who I don't tend to like much these days, but I enjoy Big Fish. I think it's definitely one of his better films of the last 20 years, if not one of his only watchable films. He's had a lot of misses, but this one is pretty good. It's very beautiful, and so I think that helps it a lot. And you've got Ewan McGregor as our lead character, and he's out uh, trying to uh, trying to figure out his father's last wishes and what is true about his life and what was false. And there's a lot of fantasy and circus kind of feel to the whole thing that's fun. And you have a great cast: Albert Finney, Billy Crudup, Helena Bonham Carter, Alison Lohman. So it's definitely, I think, worth a watch. And if you think, oh, I won't like it because it's Tim Burton, and maybe give it a shot. It's definitely one of his better ones.
Yeah, there was a time when Tim Burton was just like the biggest thing because he went from strength to strength. He went from Batman to Ed Wood to Edward Scissorhands to Beetlejuice.
Beetlejuice.
Like he was just on fire for a while. And then I don't know, it was something after like Alice in Wonderland that he was just like, okay, I my art phase is done. Now I am in my money phase. And it showed, it really did. I haven't seen Big Fish. I've heard nothing but great things, so I definitely have to check it out. But just it's sad because I used to really enjoy Tim Burton, but just with Dumbo last year or 2 years ago, it's just like why bother anymore? And I hear he's trying to do a Beetlejuice sequel, and it's like it's kind of bad enough that we're getting
Yeah.
Michael Keaton back in Batman. Now we're just let's just let's just recast Ed Wood. I mean, Depp's on the outs, so why not?
Yeah, I don't think he's or I don't think that he's had a good movie since Frankenweenie. And I think the problem is that he just keeps adapting other people's stories, and instead of telling his own stories, which he used to do, he used to tell his own stories. I mean, aside from Batman, but like he was still doing new things even then. And now, I mean, how does anybody remember his Planet of the Apes movie?
I think it's best if we forget. And at least when it comes to Batman, he did it in his own way. It
Right.
wasn't like the Adam West thing where it was like holy rusted metal Batman or something
Yeah.
like that. It was gritty, it was raw, it was gothic,
Yeah.
it was over the top, and for the time, it was absolutely what Batman needed. So and
Yeah, or
it
even
was
his Pee Wee movie is so funny. It's
so
great. But Big Fish, it's good. It's a good story. It looks beautiful, the movie, and it's sweet. And so yeah, I recommend it. So what do you have next?
So my next pick is Transporter 2. And the Transporter movies are not really liked all that much. And I get it. They're very dumb movies, but I love all three of them, even the third one, which nobody likes. But out of all of them, this one may be my favorite. This was directed by Louis Lederer, who would go on to direct Now You See Me, and also directed The Incredible Hulk, the MCU Hulk movie that everybody seems to forget is in the MCU for reasons. But After the events of the first transporter, the transporter, played by Jason Statham, is in Miami. He's taking jobs there. But actually, no, scratch that. He's in Miami and he's working for this rich couple, and he's basically their driver because he's been through enough. He just wants to make money and just retire, and a goal we all have. But then, through a combination of events, he gets caught up in this multinational scandal over, well, a virus, which seems relevant to our timeline, but that's neither here nor there. The Transporter movies, like I said, are very dumb, but I think that these movies know that they're dumb, and they don't try to be more than they are. They're not these big think pieces of what to do about international relations. Like, no, it's essentially, hi, Jason, here's your car, here's your gun, we'll leave the rest to you, and be like, okay. And so there are just too many good action scenes to mention here. There's a good fight between Statham and this big enforcer dude, and the enforcer dies by getting his head stuck in one of those boat holes that you like look out your head to. I think it's called a galley, but then he gets his head stuck in there and the boat falls off its ledge and then just it lands right on his face. It's pretty sick, but it's also pretty awesome all at the same time. The movie does kind of suffer in that there's kind of a subplot where the transporter and the wife of his boss kind of have a fling where she comes on to him and he's like, I'm not interested. And I don't think that aged too terribly well, but it's like one scene. And if you can get through that, then I'd say you'd be fine. The rest of the movie is just good, clean fun. And that's all I got to say about it.
Cool. Yeah. Well, my last suggestion is a very different transport too, but still a lot of fun. Is a movie called Sliding Doors, and this stars Gwyneth Paltrow. This is from way back in the day, and it's very clever. It's a rom-com where she goes to go back to her home, and then she almost makes the subway, but then all of a sudden the movie splits off of in one alternate reality she makes the train, and in one alternate reality she doesn't make the train. And so you see her life, and you see two different versions of her life and what would happen if so the idea is it's kind of like how do these just seemingly small things affect our lives? Like if we make one choice to go down that way, who do we meet along that way, and then how does that affect our choices? And if we go this other way, what happens? And so that's kind of a fun thought experiment, I think. And it's got some romance, and Jean Tripplehorn is super annoying in it, but if you can forgive that, that it's a pretty fun little rom-com, I would say.
It kind of sounds like the question of if you like if a butterfly flaps its wings in Japan, it'll cause a hurricane somewhere else. The whole butterfly effect.
Yeah. That's kind of the idea of it, and it's something I've thought about. It. How can you not think about that? The different paths we take, and how can these different things kind of affect of, well, if I hadn't have done this, I wouldn't have done that. And then, I've thought about that with Hallmarky's podcast, that I happen to want to cover Anne with an E, and I happen to start working with Amber, and then we got the idea for the podcast, and all those little things had to kind of come into play, mixed with a lot of hard work.
Yeah, so, it's like a role-playing game where it's like where you come to a certain point and you get like the four decisions. It'd be like A to do nothing, like X to attack, Y and all of that. You get four different decisions.
Yeah, it's true. So what's your last pick?
So my last pick is, again, this is not exactly a great movie. It's not going to like move any needles or it didn't win any big awards, but I just saw this movie so many times, it's forever ingrained in my mind. It's called Wild Hogs. This stars Tim Allen, John Travolta, Martin Lawrence, and William H. Macy. And it tells the story of these four friends who ride motorcycles together, and they realize that they're not getting any older. So the John Travolta character says, "Hey, let's go on a road trip," and they're all like, "We've got wives and lives," but then they eventually decide, you know what, let's just go. And so they end up going, and they get into a lot of trouble along the way, specifically with a real biker gang, which is headed up by Ray Liotta. And well, they accidentally blow up their bar. So there's that. Um, I remember seeing this in the theaters with my parents, and I think I was a little too young to see it because there was a lot of stuff in there that my 7 or 8 year old brain was not prepared for, but it still stayed with me as one of my favorite, I want to say, guilty pleasure movies, because it's one of those movies that it's not exactly great. It's not Tim Allen's or John Travolta's or Martin Lawrence's or William H. Macy's best work, but it seems like the four are legitimately having fun together, and it's just be like, all right, the four of you are friends, and you're like, okay, that won't be hard, and you just throw in the whole biker thing, and there's a ton of funny jokes in there where after the whole bar exploding thing happens, and they all stop off at this roadside place to get gas, and Travolta's the only one who knows that the bar blew up, and they're like, come on guys, let's live for the moment, and he drives off into the sunset, and they all follow him, and it's like the last stop for 200 miles, so they eventually run out of gas, and the first line after that is Tim Allen going, Woody, you're an asshole. It's an amazing line, and there are many good moments like there. So if you haven't seen it, it's not too dirty, but it's just enough to have a bit of an edge, I suppose.
I remember when this came out, it got thrashed by the critics. It got really bad reviews, but I actually think it's funny too. And maybe it's just because my dad had a midlife crisis where he got super into motorcycling and particularly dirt bike racing for him. And he still does it, still loves it. But a lot of the jokes kind of rang true because of what my dad had gone through. And so, yeah, I think it's actually funny. So, it's tough. Humor is the most subjective of all of the types of films, but I had a good laugh watching it. So
there's a cameo in there from the American Chopper guys, and considering how irrelevant they are now, it's one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, those guys were a thing for a while that my dad watched every Friday night.
Right. Yeah, that's true. So yeah, if you have seen any of these movies that we recommend, let us know in the comment section or on Twitter. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And Ryan, where can people find you?
They can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd at RyanCam20. Then there's, of course, my YouTube channel, which is just called Ryan Cam. This week, I'm going to be releasing AFI project videos for Duck Soup, which is the classic movie from the Marx Brothers, which is said to be their very best work. And then, pull up my list, and then after that, I'm going to be talking about Sullivan's Travels from 1941. And then this coming Sunday, I'll be reviewing Grave of the Fireflies in honor of my watch-alongs of all the Studio Ghibli movies. And then February 14th, not this coming Sunday, but the next Sunday, in honor of Valentine's Day, I'm going to be reviewing all the Twilight movies, because I guess I'm a masochist or something. But if you want to watch me suffer through them, please subscribe. I put a lot of hard work into the channel. I'm very proud of it. The Alien video did great. It came out very well. So I'm putting a lot of good work into it. So if you haven't checked me out, please do.
Yeah, that's a lot of variety there. Duck Soup to Twilight, everything in between. So y'all should check it out. And you can find me at Rachel's Reviews, all over social media, iTunes, YouTube, and on Rotten Tomatoes. So please check that out. I'm going to be reviewing and watching a bunch of movies for Sundance Film Festival coming up. And so I'm going to have lots of coverage on my blog and all over the place. Make sure you're following me. And also doing the animator, and I'm also doing the Sundance Animator Spotlights at Rotoscopers. So please check that out. That's been so much fun, these interviews. And so, yeah, and also check out Hallmarkies Podcast. We have our Hallmarkies Podcast Awards this week. So we have a ton of stars actually we got to accept their awards, which was pretty cool. We have Lacey Chabert, which was a huge get. So if you haven't checked out Hallmarkies Podcast, this is the one to watch. It's really cool. So all that going on, and let us know what you think of IMDb TV and also of our recommendations. We'd love to hear your thoughts. So thanks so much, and we'll talk to you all later. Bye, everyone.
Bye.